You think you know the story of Princess Diana's will. You probably heard the headlines: a grieving family, a loyal butler, a few controversial auctions. But here's what most people don't know. The real story of what Diana did with her estate isn't simply about money. It's about power, defiance, and a woman who used her final legal document to say everything she could no longer say out loud. By the time this is over, you'll see that Diana's will wasn't just illicit assets. It was her last act of rebellion, and the ripple effects are still being felt today. To understand why Diana's estate choices were so extraordinary, you have to understand what she was up against. Diana Frances Spencer was 20 years old when she married Charles, the Prince of Wales, on July 29, 1981. Roughly 750 million people watched the ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral, a staggering audience for a single event in the pre-internet era. The world didn't simply watch a wedding. It watched what it believed was a fairy tale becoming real. But behind the cathedral doors, something entirely different was unfolding. Diana later said publicly, most famously in her landmark 1995 interview with journalist Martin Bashir on the BBC's Panorama program, that there were three of us in this marriage. Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, which had predated his courtship of Diana, had never truly ended. The couple formally separated in 1992. Transcript of intimate phone calls between Charles and Camilla, leaked to the press and known as the Camillagate tapes, had already caused a global scandal that same year. The divorce was finalized in August 1996. As part of the settlement, Diana received approximately £17 million and was stripped of the style of Her Royal Highness. She remained Diana, Princess of Wales, but she was no longer formally a working member of the royal family. What she did with her freedom is remarkable. Rather than retreating into the consolations of wealth and privacy, Diana accelerated her humanitarian work. In January 1997, just months before her death, she traveled to Angola with the international campaign to ban landmines, walking carefully through mine-clear corridors and fields where unexploded ordnance still lurked. The photographs of her in protective gear, walking paths that had once killed and maimed civilians, made front pages around the world. The Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel landmines was signed that December. The international campaign to ban landmines won the Nobel Peace Prize that same year. In 1987, she had visited AIDS patients at Middlesex Hospital, shaking hands without gloves at a time when a rational public fear about transmission was causing enormous suffering to those already ill. The gesture was simple. The impact was profound. Diana understood something that the palace never fully grasped. That human proximity, the willingness to touch, to sit with, to look someone in the eye, carries a moral authority that no official statement can replicate. And when it came to her final legal document, she applied the same instinct. Here is where we need to separate documented fact from the mythology that is built up around Diana's estate. Diana's original will was dated June 1st, 1993, years before her divorce, during a period when she was still navigating the deteriorating marriage and her increasingly independent public role. The will was amended through a codicil in 1996, following the divorce settlement. According to probate filings at the High Court Justice in England, Diana's gross estate at the time of her death on August 31st, 1997 was valued at approximately £21.7 million. After inheritance taxes, which amounted to nearly £14 million, the net estate was approximately £17 million. The primary beneficiaries were clear. Her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, who were 15 and 13 years old respectively at the time of their mother's death. The will specify that assets be held in trust for both boys until they each reach the age of 25, at which point they could begin receiving income from their shares. At 30, they would be entitled to the full capital. Diana also wrote what is known as a letter of wishes, a document signed the day after her will, which outlined how she wanted her personal belongings, or chattels, distributed. In this letter, she asked that all of her jewelry and 3/4 of her chattels be passed to William and Harry. The remaining quarter was designated for her 17 godchildren. Her beloved butler Paul Burrell, the man Diana famously called her Rock, was named in the will as a beneficiary, receiving £50,000, roughly equivalent to $80,000 at the time. This was a significant personal gift, reflecting the depth of the relationship they had built over a decade of his service to her household. Now, here's the crucial detail that most people get wrong. Paul Burrell was not the executor of Diana's estate. The will named her mother, the Honorable Frances Ruth Shan Kidd, and her sister, Lady Elizabeth Sarah Lavinia McCorkadale, as the executors and trustees. A 1996 codicil replaced Diana's former private secretary Patrick Jeffson with her sister Lady Sarah in the executor role. This distinction matters enormously. After Diana's death, her executors, her mother and sister, took the estate through probate court. What happened next is where things become genuinely surprising, and where questions of legacy and control become most complicated. Without notifying the parents of the godchildren, most of whom were minors at the time, Frances Shan Kidd and Lady Sarah McCorkadale petitioned the court for a legal under the original terms. The godchildren were to receive 1/4 of the value of Diana's personal belongings, excluding jewelry. Under the variation order, they instead each received a single item from the estate. The distribution to William and Harry was also altered. Rather than accessing their full share at 25, they could receive income from the trust starting at 25, but could not claim the full capital until they turned 30. This variation was conducted without public announcement and came to light only through an unrelated legal proceeding several years later. Prince Harry celebrated his 30th birthday in September 2014, the moment at which he became entitled to his full share of the remaining estate. Diana had planned carefully for her son's futures, but the formal mechanics of that plan were altered after her death by the very people she trusted to carry it out. It is one of the quietly startling details of royal inheritance history. Burrell had served Diana from 1987 until her death. He helped prepare her body for burial in 1997 and was, according to contemporaneous reports, the only person outside her immediate family to attend a burial at Althorpe, her family's ancestral estate. Shortly afterward, Queen Elizabeth II awarded him the Royal Victorian Medal for his service. In 2001, police raided Burrell's home and found a significant number of Diana's personal effects, letters, photographs, and other items. He was charged with stealing 342 items belonging to Diana, Prince Charles, and Prince William. The trial began in October 2002. Then came one of the most dramatic reversals in recent British legal history. During the trial, the Queen herself intervened. It emerged that Burrell had informed Queen Elizabeth II in a private meeting shortly after Diana's death in 1997 that he was holding some of the princess's possessions for safekeeping, documents and personal items he feared might otherwise be lost or destroyed. The Queen had apparently not communicated this to police investigators, and the information had never reached the prosecution. Once this came to light, the trial collapsed. Burrell was acquitted. The acquittal raised profound questions about what exactly Burrell had been protecting, why it had taken 5 years for this information to surface, and what was in those letters and documents he had chosen to preserve. In 2003, Burrell published a memoir titled A Royal Duty, in which he disclosed details of his time with Diana, including portions of the letter she had written him. The letter, which Diana wrote to Burrell in 1993, expressed her fear that a plan was being made to discredit her, possibly through a staged car accident, in advance of what she feared might be a campaign to clear the way for Charles to remarry. The existence and content of this letter caused a considerable sensation, and royal family members were reported to be furious about its publication. During the 2008 inquest into Diana's death, presided over by Coroner Lord Justice Scott Baker, it also emerged that Burrell had secretly made copies of private correspondence between Diana and members of the royal family. The inquest ultimately concluded that Diana's death in the Paris tunnel on August 31st, 1997, was a result of grossly negligent driving by her chauffeur Henri Paul, combined with the actions of pursuing paparazzi photographers. Beyond the legal drama, Diana's estate left a concrete legacy that is measurable and documented. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, was established after her death, partly funded through proceeds from the estate, an enormous global charitable response to her passing. The fund directed millions of pounds toward the causes she championed during her lifetime: AIDS research, landmine clearance, and children's welfare organizations. Her intellectual property rights, copyrights, trademarks, royalties arising from the commercial use of her name and likeness, were also part of the estate and directed toward her sons and charitable purposes. Althorpe, The Spencer family's ancestral estate in Northamptonshire, where Diana is buried, became a site of public pilgrimage after her death, with her brother Charles Spencer, the ninth Earl Spencer, opening the grounds to visitors each summer. Diana's grave on an island in the ornamental lake draws roughly 100,000 visitors a year, according to the estate's figures. The causes she championed have had lasting policy impact. The Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel landmines has now been signed by 164 countries. The treatment of AIDS patients in the United Kingdom, and to some degree globally, was measurably changed by the shift in public perception that began in part with her handshake in that Middlesex hospital ward in 1987. These were not accidental outcomes. Diana made strategic decisions about what she would support, when and how. Her will was an extension of that strategy. It would be dishonest to tell this story only in triumphant terms. The estate and its aftermath had a complicated emotional cost for the people closest. Terms. The variation was granted. To her, William and Harry were adolescents when their mother died. They were teenagers navigating grief while living inside one of the most scrutinized institutions on earth. The trust Diana established were designed to protect their independence, to give them financial security that did not pass through royal channels. But independence and grief do not resolve each other neatly. In his 2023 memoir Spare, Prince Harry described growing up in the shadow of his mother's death with raw candor and characterized aspects of the institutional response to that grief in terms that echoed, intentionally or not, the language Diana herself had used in the Panorama interview almost 30 years earlier. That continuity of voice across a generation says something significant about what Diana succeeded in passing on. Prince William's public response to his mother's legacy has been characterized by a different kind of stewardship, measured, institutional, directed toward charitable work through organizations like the Diana Award. Both responses are genuine. Both carry the weight of loss. Burrell's own story took further turns. He became a media figure in the years after the trial, appearing on reality television, publishing further books, giving interviews. His relationship with both princes became publicly strained, particularly after the publication of A Royal Duty. In 2023, he publicly rebuked Prince Harry's claims about him, stating the allegations were false and deeply hurtful. He also, in later years, revealed that he had been hacked. The publisher of the Daily Mirror eventually paid Burrell substantial damages and issued a formal public apology after it was established that his voicemails had been illegally intercepted between 1995 and 2008, a period that included the lead-up to his criminal trial and the years in which his relationship with the royal family was most publicly combustible. The hacking revelation added yet another layer of complexity to an already tangled story. Information that had been portrayed in the press during that period as embarrassing or suspicious had been obtained, in part, through criminal means. Strip away the drama, the contested narratives and the tabloid mythology, and what do we actually learn from Diana's estate? We learn that she was a planner. The 1993 will, amended in 1996, shows someone thinking carefully about contingencies, about what happens to children, to money, to intellectual property, when the person who holds it all together is suddenly gone. She did not leave these matters to chance or to the goodwill of an institution she had reason to distrust. We learned that even the most careful planning can be modified after death. The court-approved variation to her letter of wishes, achieved without notifying the families of the godchildren she had named, is a sobering reminder that a legal document is only as powerful as the institutional structures that enforce it. Diana trusted her mother and sister to carry out her wishes. They chose a different path. We learn that trust, in the human rather than legal sense, is extraordinarily difficult to verify across the boundary of death. Diana trusted Paul Burrell with her deepest confidences. She left him a significant personal bequest. She told him things she told almost no one else. Whether that trust was ultimately honored, betrayed, or simply